everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Divorce and Separation Coach podcast. Today's episode is all about how to master how you show up in stressful situations, because how you present yourself in settings such as family court or mediation can make a real difference. In such emotionally charged settings, body language, tone, and mindset all play a role in how your message is received. So learning how to communicate with calm, clarity, and confidence isn't about performance. It's about giving yourself the best chance to be heard and understood when the stakes are high. To talk about this, I've invited Grace Fogarty. She spent 12 years designing and delivering communication skills workshops for corporate organizations such as Clifford Chance, BNP Paribas, HSBC, and EY. She specializes in presentation skills, empowering people to find their voice, own the room, and speak with confidence to have a greater impact. Grace is also an actor and a scriptwriter, most recently performing her debut one-woman comedy in London. So she brings a wealth of experience that can prove extremely valuable for those going through divorce and finding themselves in unfamiliar and stressful settings. Grace, it's awesome to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Chloe. It's lovely to be here.
I'm looking forward to picking your brain because you've got so much experience about how to show up, how to present yourself. And at a time where you're feeling very vulnerable and insecure during divorce, it can be particularly difficult to represent yourself in the right way. So maybe we start with first impressions and the power of first impressions. How much do first impressions really matter in your experience?
First impressions matter hugely because the way that you speak and the way you hold yourself and how you start a conversation gives us information about who you are and how you're feeling
Yep.
subconsciously straight away, right? I think, the old whatever stat it is that it takes 7 seconds to make a first
Yeah.
impression. I've heard different variations of the number, but the thing is that like how we are feeling, our emotions are contagious, right?
Yep.
So if you are speaking for the first time or you're meeting someone for the first time and you feel really nervous, or you're stressed, or you're feeling overwhelmed, if that emotion starts to come through in the way that you speak in the
Mhm.
first minute of speaking to someone, straight away, it gives them that information. And that might make
Yes.
them feel stressed or nervous. It might make them like not respect you as much. It might
Hmm.
make them not listen to you in the same way. And often these responses from someone else can be subconscious, that they might not
Yes.
even realize they're doing it. They might also feel sorry for you, like it could be positive emotions. But it's so important to really be able to kind of nail that first impression so that the starting position for you and the person you're speaking to is positive, where
Yes.
they can feel your calm, they feel your confidence, because that's going to influence how they start to respond to you, whether that's consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, linked to that is kind of when if somebody introduces you to someone and says, "Oh, you should meet Grace. She's really great," that you're already starting with that positive bias, and it's the same idea. So what can people do to try and make sure that the first impression they give others is powerful and aligned to how they want to be seen?
I think it's all about what you do in the moments before that interaction happens, right?
Wow.
So if I'll use like an example of what I mean from like performing, because if you're
Mhm.
about to go on stage as an actor, you are doing your emotional prep and your physical prep off stage. So you might
Yeah.
be in the wings, jumping on the spot, telling yourself, a mantra that you have for your character, imagining yourself in like a really exciting situation if you're about to do a really fun scene. You're doing all of that literally until the moment you get on stage.
Yeah.
And that's so that you are completely primed emotionally and physically to play that character. And you can take
Yeah.
exactly the same principle when you are about to go into like a high stakes, stressful conversation. So
Yeah.
think about what you do the moments before that happens. Now, in terms of like your physical preparation, this could be things like taking some really deep breaths, like just, a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Something I really like to do is like shaking, literally like
Yeah.
shaking out that nervous energy. That also really helps to calm your nervous system. So that can be a really nice thing to do as well. Um, and in terms of your mental prep, reminding yourself of the things that you want to get across, having
Mhm.
that clarity of what your message is, knowing what the first thing you're going to say is as well,
That
can be really
helps.
helpful. And then using things like positive affirmations to really get yourself in the right headspace. You know, I can do this. I've got this. I know what I'm talking about. If you can do those three things together, you know, you've got your affirmations, you know what you're going to say first, you're physically calming yourself,
Hmm.
then boom, you open the door and you go in. Like that's really going to put you in the best possible position to have a brilliant first impression.
And it's true that usually in stressful situations is the very first part where we're very, still finding our footing. And actually, once you get into the groove, you're okay. It's that first, few minutes where, you're very nervous, you don't know what to expect, and you're
Mm.
walking into an unfamiliar setting.
Yeah. And I think something that can be really helpful is I watched a brilliant TED talk by Kelly McGonigal, who talks about
Hmm.
how to turn stress into your best friend. And it's a really cool
Oh.
video. It's a study about the impact that stress has on your body. And
Hmm.
she talks about how you can reframe stress. And this is
Yeah,
really helpful actually to do in those moments because like your adrenaline spikes just before
that's
you're
it.
about to do it,
Yeah.
right? Something she talks about in the video that I often use myself and that I teach to my clients, like the people I work with, is that you can tell yourself, my body is preparing me for the challenge that is about to happen, you know? So it's because often when we feel that adrenaline and we get our sweaty palms and the butterflies and all that, it like reinforces this thought in your mind of like, I'm so nervous, I don't know what I'm doing, oh, blah, 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 and you get
Yeah.
carried away. But actually, if you can notice those physical things happening, but you tell yourself, my body is preparing me for what's going to,
Hmm.
my body, I feel excited about what's
Hmm.
happening because if you think about it, the way our bodies respond to excitement and nerves is the same, like the
That's true.
heart pounding, the kind of jittery energy. And so reframing that in your mind to counteract the kind of physiological response can be really, really powerful to help with that
Yeah.
initial like peak of nervous energy.
I love that. I mean, with a lot of things in life, the way you look at them is going to change how you experience them. And
Totally.
so with first impressions, you mentioned preparing what you're going to say first, but there's also body language, right, involved. And how do people use body language to convey the right message? What kind of tips do you share on that?
Yeah, so it's all about knowing the difference between like positive, open body language and then
Hmm.
closed body language. So
Okay.
closed body language is what we tend to do when we are feeling nervous. So this is where maybe you're like fidgeting with your hands, maybe your shoulders are hunched. You're literally trying to make yourself small, you know?
Hmm.
Other things that people do is like rock side to side, they pace around all of these things, again, it's like building to that emotional contagion that I talked about
Yeah.
before, is that if someone can feel, they can sense that you're nervous by the way you're holding yourself. So
Yeah.
the way to counteract that is to use really lovely, like tool open body language. So
Yeah.
before you go into a room, just adjusting your posture, I like to call it like the body scan. So you start with your head, you make sure that you've got your head lifted so that your eyes are looking forward, have a smile on your face.
Yes.
Then you
Yeah.
scan down, think about your shoulders, roll your shoulders back, have your chest lifted. We're not talking like it really exaggerated, but just lifted to make sure your posture's straight. Then you scan down your body. Is my back straight? Like just adjust your back. And then what you do with your hands is really
Yes, that's a big
important.
one. What to do with your hands.
What do I do with my hands? Yeah, it's one of the
Yeah.
most frequently asked questions I get. Now, what you want to do is you want to have your hands visible. The
Yeah.
moment that you hide your hands, that gives an indication to the person you're speaking to that you have something to hide, and that makes
Oh,
them not
interesting.
trust you. That's actually like a that's a it's from like caveman times that
Yes,
is an
it sounds like
indication.
or if they had a gun behind their back or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Like it's
Yeah.
telling us something's hidden and something dangerous is going to
Yeah.
happen. So you always have your hands visible. You want
Yeah.
to have your hands open with your palms open and relaxed by your side. When
Okay.
you're speaking, the best is to, I can't quite let me show you the camera, the angle of the camera, but if you think about having
Yeah.
a box that goes just below your shoulders down to
Hmm.
your waist, this is
Hmm.
the box that you want to move your hands in. So
Okay.
speaking with open palms and allowing your hands to move, but within that space, kind of in
Okay.
front of your chest, that's the best, most kind of trusting, open place to have your hands and to keep your hand
Okay.
gestures. You don't want to overthink it. You don't need to, you see sometimes like politicians doing really choreographed hand gestures. Again, like the more you
Yeah.
overthink it, the more it's going to work against you. So if using hand gestures doesn't come naturally to you, and that's going to immediately become something that throws you off, you can have your hands, but have your hands like clasped like this or like this.
Okay.
So you avoid arms folded at all costs, but having your hands just resting gently like this in front of you can be like it's calm and it's open. You're not having to worry about moving your hands, but it's showing the other person that they can trust you.
That's great. It's amazing the messages we get from gestures that we don't even think about in
Yeah.
day-to-day life.
Yeah, it's all subconscious. Yeah.
And what about eye contact? I would imagine that's a really important part of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when it comes to eye contact, I mean, first of all, make eye contact. I mean, and
Yes.
maybe that sounds really obvious, but I think when you're nervous, it's really tempting to like look down and look around the
Yeah.
room. But if you can make it feel natural, you make eye contact with someone. And that's really important initially. When you have that
Yeah.
initial hello introduction, maybe you're shaking hands, make eye contact to help build that human kind of relationship.
Yeah.
And then as you speak, if it's conversational, use eye contact as you would when you're speaking to a friend or a
Hmm.
family member at home. If you're presenting to a room full of people, when it comes to eye contact, actually, what's really good to do is something I like to call like the spotlight effect, where
Okay.
imagine that with your eyes, you are shining a spotlight on your audience. If you
Okay.
take a step back, I'm picturing, let's say there's 100 people in the room. So
Yeah.
if you are looking out at your audience, you can imagine you've got this nice wide view of your spotlight. And then what you want to do as you're speaking is that you put your spotlight on different people in the audience. Now, the key with this is that you don't want your spotlight on anyone for more than like one sentence. Otherwise, it becomes really intense and like you freak people out. You've like zoned in on someone. So keep your spotlight moving, but just think about this idea, this like image in your mind. You're just gently resting your spotlight on different people around the room as you speak. And that way, you'll help to keep everyone feel included in what you're
Yeah,
talking about. And again, that's just brilliant when it comes to engaging your audience.
for sure. And what about when you're speaking to one person? Is it uncomfortable to be staring at them and really keeping that eye contact? Should you be moving around? What's the recommendation on that front?
Yeah, so it's a balance, right? You don't
Mhm.
want to avoid eye contact altogether, but nor do you want to be like zoomed in and staring at them. So you keep the eye contact light. Feel free to look around the room, particularly when you're thinking. That's like a natural point where you would
It
look
is,
around the
yeah.
room anyway. What I would say with eye contact is that it's looking up rather than down. When you start to look
Huh?
down, straight away your body language is becoming smaller again. That's
That's true.
often something, again, that we do. We look down at the floor if we're feeling nervous. So keep the eyes looking at the other person or looking upwards as you're thinking, just to keep that open, confident relationship.
Oh, I love that. So coming back to the words you use and how you can make sure that when you're speaking, you're being clear, you exude confidence. There's of course the choice of words, and then there's the way in which you deliver them. But what
Mm.
would be your advice around that?
So I think there's two parts to this, and it all comes in your preparation, right? First of all, it's about really knowing what it is that you want to say. If there are some points that you want to make sure you get across in a
Mhm.
conversation, really investing time in knowing what those points are and
Yeah.
practice saying the words out loud. If you're asking for something, if you're like communicating something that's a bit tricky, know what it is you want to say and practice saying it out loud before your meeting or the conversation. The reason for that is that you never want, if it's a high stakes situation, you don't want the things that you need to say to be coming out of your mouth for the first time in that high stakes situation.
Yes.
Because
And then you hear them
immediately,
and you're like, oh, that's not what I
oh,
wanted to say.
yeah, but particularly if it's like, I don't know if you're negotiating or you're asking something, it's not something you typically do
Mhm.
because that will throw you off and then you're at risk of derailing the conversation. So saying those words out loud and, say them out loud as many times as you can in the mirror when you're getting ready, when you're walking the dog, when you're in the shower, just get used to those words so that when you're in the meeting, your body is already used to them and it just feels natural and it feels
Yeah.
comfortable. That's going to make a huge difference
I
in how
love
you come
that.
across.
I do that a lot with clients who have either going to mediation or who are going to have a difficult conversation with their spouse or their children, preparing little, very short answers to the questions you know are going to come up so that you're already armed when, the minute that comes up, you know what you're going to say. You're not improvising in the moment. That makes such a difference.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It is very similar to like when an actor prepares to go on stage, right? Like they do a dress rehearsal and you're just
Hmm.
doing exactly the same thing. Like you're getting
Yeah,
really comfortable, because in some ways it's almost like you have to play a character of a more confident version of yourself. So what would
that's
that
true.
person say?
Yeah.
What words would they use? How would they say it?
So you said there were two parts. So that's the first part. What
Yes,
was the
that's
second?
the
I
first.
interrupted you.
The second part is about how you say it, like
Okay.
said. So you've got to know what you say, make those words feel really comfortable. And then in terms of how you say it, when you're speaking, you want to, again, when we're nervous, it's really tempting to rush. So you've got to slow down your pace of
Yeah.
words. Generally speaking, less is more. Speaking slower, using fewer words has gravitas, and
Hmm.
allowing space, pausing, allowing someone to respond, that adds so much weight to what you want to
Yeah.
say. So, thinking about your pace, slowing it down. If you are someone that naturally speaks really quickly, it's going to feel uncomfortable, but that's all the
Mhm.
more reason to practice speaking at a slower speed before your meeting. And then also doing things like speaking, obviously it depends on what the topic is, but using your facial expressions to like really bring your message across can be really helpful. So if you're enthusiastic about something, like saying something and smiling at the same time, or like using your eyebrows, using your whole face, because when you can channel like an energy through your words, that is what will help your message land with people.
Yeah.
So if you're saying something with a lot of weight that's really serious, that's maybe sensitive or hard to say, a slow pace, a more somber tone of voice is
Mhm.
really helpful.
Mhm.
If you want to talk about something with excitement, with motivation, then having a smile, lifting your eyebrows, using more energy, that will help to lift the message. So it's
Yeah.
about adapting to how you want to come across.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned something that's really important is the power of pausing. I think when
Yeah.
we're nervous, we tend to just blurt things out, feel like we need to get it over with. But actually, just taking the time to think. I often tell
Mm.
clients if they're wearing a ring, turn it 3 times before you answer anything that's being asked of you, just to force yourself to have just even those couple seconds to ground yourself to think about where you're going to say. But we do tend to shoot from the hip, and
Yeah.
and learning that silence is uncomfortable for a lot of people. But there's
Mm.
a real tool there with silence with regards to difficult conversations.
One of my favorite ways to handle that in a situation is to say, that is a really good question. In fact, now I've said that to you, I'm definitely going to do it in our conversation. But if you can like acknowledge, because I think if someone asks you a question and then you're pausing and you pause too long, it might start to feel a bit stilted, or they might think you don't know what the answer is.
That's true.
But actually you can use like, say, oh, that's a really good question. Like, and this is a nice way to like bring in your eye contact, looking up, like, I really want to let me think about what the right way to answer this is. Okay. And actually, if you say things like that, it shows people that you are really taking it seriously. Whereas
Hmm.
if you just rush into an answer because you're like, oh God, I don't know the answer. Oh, it again, like you risk losing credibility and you risk losing
Yeah,
respect. But it's okay to say, I've acknowledged the question. I'm thinking about it. It just
yeah,
signals to the person you're taking it seriously. And the pausing is really helpful to land your point. So you make your point and then you just pause and then you wait
yeah.
for the other person. You don't need to keep talking to fill the space. You make
That's
your
it.
point and you pause and that,
And that's what happens when we're nervous, right? We fill that
yeah,
space because the silence is scary.
yeah,
Another example of that is those kind of filler words that people use, where they start saying or like, or whatever word they choose to use. And we all have them built into the way we speak without realizing it.
yeah.
How can people avoid using those? How can they train themselves not to?
I mean, I think the best thing you can do is first of all learn what yours are. And the
Yes.
way to do that is to record yourself speaking, which
Ah,
I
yeah.
know everybody hates to do, but it is
Join my
so,
podcast.
yeah, yeah, exactly, right? People hate watching themselves being recorded. I mean, it's uncomfortable, but it's so valuable in
Yeah,
terms of you learning what it is that you do, because you probably have a nervous filler word that you use that you're not even
we
aware
all
of.
do.
Yeah, and it's what it's like to kind of get rid of it. It's first of all working out what it is and
Mhm.
then noticing, and then it all comes in the practice, practicing saying what you want to say, noticing when you say it, going again, and getting used to talking without that word in, is the simplest way to get started.
And usually, once you realize it's there, you start re noticing every time you use it. And something
Yeah.
like, how did I not realize I was doing that all the time?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh God, this is just my word. Do you know what? Something I also see people do that I was just thinking when you said filler words is that I see people when they feel nervous, the first thing they say is sorry. They stand up and like,
Oh,
oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I haven't really done this before. I'm sorry. Just apologizing for literally standing up. And
yeah,
then they go, oh, sorry, I'm feeling a bit nervous. Sorry, haven't quite got this. Sorry, sorry, sorry. And then they start talking. And again, like that, if that is one of your kind of filler words or things that you do, just stop saying sorry because you're apologizing for being there, and
yeah,
again, like that is such a powerful message to the person you're meeting with. And like there's nothing to apologize for. And
yeah.
actually, like taking that time, I'm imagining in my mind someone standing up, but like if you were walking into a room, just pausing and then saying hello. And you don't need to panic and fill with sorry. It works against you.
And it feels like actually, I think I had read that somewhere that women use the word sorry excessively. I
Yeah.
don't know why we're somehow conditioned to do that. But yes, learning that
Yes,
it's actually not a filler word. It should be used when you really mean to apologize, not as a way of just filling gaps.
totally. There's this woman, this founder who I think is brilliant. She's called Lauren Curry, and she
Mhm.
has a company called Global that teaches women confidence. And
Ah,
she talks about having a sorry jar. And every
yeah,
time you say the word sorry, like you put a penny in the jar
there
and
you
build it
go.
up. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's one way to train yourself out of it. Get a sorry jar.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, the way in way we express ourselves is going to convey that confidence as well. The verbs we use, the power of the words we choose is going to really matter. And
Yeah.
so for people who aren't at ease in these kind of contexts, there's always, I guess, this fear that you're not going to be authentic and you're kind of putting on a show. And how do you make sure that you know what you're doing and you're presenting in the way you want to, but that it still feels natural?
Mm. I think it's about getting the balance right between your preparation and what you say in the moment. Like preparation is key. Like it is, I know it's like such a cliche, but it is so important, particularly if you are feeling nervous about something.
Yeah.
So knowing exactly, like I kind of said, knowing exactly what you want to say and then practicing, but making sure that you're not learning a script. Like I
Yes.
think yeah, I have people coming to me sometimes saying, "Oh my God, I just need to learn a script. If only I had a script for how to deal with, like, I don't know, the small talk at the beginning of a business meeting, then I'd be fine." And
Yeah.
actually, I think there is a time and a place for scripts, being
Mhm.
on stage is one of them. But actually, when it's in a conversation or a meeting, a script is it, you kind of, you make a rod for your own back because all you need to happen is for someone to ask you something you hadn't planned for, and then the script
Ah,
doesn't work
yes.
anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So instead of having a script that you kind of memorize that then you like deliver,
Yeah.
have your bullet points that you want to say in your mind, and then
Yeah.
give yourself permission to be a human, to have a conversation. It might be helpful even to think of what is something that you say at the beginning of the meeting? Is there a kind of question that you could ask that small talk, is there something you could comment on? Is there like a little anecdote you could share at the beginning that's just about you that helps to break that ice? There's nothing wrong with preparing those things and having them in your back, your kind of your mental back pocket.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's like a nice happy medium between going in completely unprepared and then fully, trying to be verbatim.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how pe can people prepare themselves? So, you mentioned breathing exercises, shaking it out. Do you have any other tips in terms of how someone can get themselves in the right mindset, in the right spirit before entering these kind of contexts that might be really intimidating?
Something really powerful that I love to do with people I work with is to actually like visualize what success looks like. right? So to do this, you imagine yourself in the scenario, and it's actually really powerful to imagine yourself from even the night before.
Yeah.
From the night before, what you do in the morning, your journey to get to wherever you're having the meeting, how that meeting goes, and how you feel afterwards. Take yourself through a visualization, but imagine how you want to feel and what you want to be doing at every stage of that journey. So it might
Okay.
be like, you imagine yourself going to sleep feeling really calm, having a brilliant night's sleep. You wake up in the morning, you put on your outfit, you look in the mirror, you feel fantastic. You leave the house, you listen to like some really uplifting music, you enter the room, your intro is so slick, you're really charming. The conversation is great. You land your points really confidently. You get the result you want. You leave and you text your friend or whoever saying, "Oh my God, I nailed it." Allow yourself to really imagine what that full journey looks like, exactly how you want it to look like.
Okay.
Doing that, visualizing that success is helping to tell the brain and the body, this is what it's going to look like, right? Because the brain
Okay.
doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's not. So if you can use visualization, imagine what that successful vision looks like. And then when you know that, when you know how you want to show up in the room, then ask yourself, okay, so what does the version of me that acts like that, what do they do? What are
Yeah.
they eating for breakfast? What are they doing on the journey? What are they doing physically? Like maybe like going to the gym for you is a really good way of relieving stress. Maybe that successful version of you is going to the gym, the
Yeah.
hour before the meeting. Use like because there are so many different things that you can do, and I could list like 20 different tips, right? But ultimately it's about you connecting to yourself and the best version of you and what's going to work for you. That is
Mhm.
such a powerful shift because
Yeah.
that successful version of you exists. It is you. It is
Yeah.
possible to be that person, but you've got to start with the end in mind and then work
Yeah.
backwards and work out what's going to work for me to get into that most calm, confident state of mind.
I love that. And it's true that the power of having clarity on what success looks like, this, knowing this conversation will be a success if we get to an agreement on X or Y, or if I manage to stay calm during the whole time, whatever it is you set yourself as a
Yeah,
target. But that's then an objective metric as well of how things went.
totally. Because when you're nervous about something, like normally it's the anticipation that's the worst part. And
Mm.
also, it's very easy to only imagine the worst case scenario. Like, oh
Yes.
God, I'm going to get in there. I'm going to be sweaty. I'm going to spill my coffee. I'm going to get all my words wrong. They're going to hate me. They're going to say no. And we like spiral, but actually,
Yeah.
like, give yourself that positive view to show yourself what's possible. And I love what you said,
Yeah.
having the metrics that you can yeah, because it's not only the outcome, it's also like how you felt in that
That's
conversation. And that
exactly
is
it. And for a
huge.
lot of people, it isn't, in the context of divorce, because sometimes it's facing the other person that you may not have seen for a while, that you might have very strong feeling towards, whatever kind of feelings. And so it can be just in of itself very triggering. And I think
Mm,
what comes out through all the things that you've said, all the tips you've shared, is that it doesn't really matter what the other person's doing. They will do them, but you
yeah.
have to do you. And if you do you properly, then you are in control of the situation. And I think that's a really powerful message for people.
Yeah, that is so true. I did some brilliant work with a woman who's like a therapist and a hypnotherapist earlier this year. And something
Yeah.
that she taught me is that when you change how you interact, the other person has no choice but to change. So
Yeah.
if you always fall into the same pattern of an argument or the way that you interact with someone, and you want that to change and you want them to change, and you're like, oh, I wish they didn't, whatever, they will only change if you change. So you
Yeah.
have to make a conscious decision to do something different, whether that is something that you say or how you present yourself or a question you ask. But actually, I find it incredibly empowering to remember that, to be like, I
Mhm.
can actually influence someone else, but I have to be the one that makes the change.
Yeah.
Set the boundary, communicate clearly, ask for something, and it will force them to shift. They might still not react in the way that you
Yes,
want them to.
doesn't mean you're controlling them,
You
but
can't.
you
You
can't
can't
change
control
that.
them, but you can control what you do, and that can have such a powerful ripple effect.
I had exactly that example this week with a client who was going to mediation with her husband, and they had the very obvious from the outside to me pattern of behavior, and we did a lot of work on helping her break that pattern and show up as a different person, show up as somebody who was less, pushy, less authoritative, that was making him be very reactive. And she said that the look on his face as she was speaking and using a very different way of presenting herself, different way of speaking, of letting him speak, etc. She said it took him aback, and that she noticed a real shift in his attitude because she wasn't playing the role she'd been playing this whole time. And so suddenly it was all a different dance.
Yeah, exactly. That is literally what it is because like you are just playing a different role in
Yeah,
a in a dynamic. Like how do you facilitate the dynamic that you're in? And
yeah.
it's yeah, that's amazing. It just goes to show it's so powerful when you can make that shift. And I think that's also where like connecting to this idea of like the successful version of you, you can
Hmm.
also factor that into your visualization of like how
Yeah.
do I want them to react. Okay, so what do I need to be doing differently to help me
Mhm.
get closer to that outcome?
Yeah. Yeah,
Again,
absolutely.
acknowledging you can't control them, but you could try. I'm
But
joking.
having that
It's not my,
self-awareness, you're right, is very important because that's
yeah,
that's the bit you can change.
exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Grace. It was so nice to have you. Thank you for
Oh,
sharing all your tips. Can you tell our listeners how they can get in touch if they have any questions or if they feel they need your help?
yeah, absolutely. And they can find me on LinkedIn. My name, yeah, Grace Fogarty. I'm sure it'll be written on the podcast. But yeah, if someone's listening and wants to ask more, please like just send me a message. I'm always really happy to chat. And yeah, it would be lovely to hear from your listeners.
Thanks so much, Grace. You have a lovely day.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Chloe.